Hello everyone, it's me Tommy. Right before I show you my collection, I'm going to show you something very special. This is a Game Boy Advance SP. This is a console made by Nintendo, and it was the first console to have a flip screen, and it has a rechargeable battery, and the first handheld console with a light that you can see in the dark when you play games. And it also plays not just Game Boy Advance games, but Game Boy games and Game Boy Color games. How cool was that? This is actually one of my favorite handheld consoles of all time. I got that for Christmas 20 years ago, back in 2005. And I had a lot of great memories playing with this thing. But now, let's move on to the games, shall we? The first game I have in my collection is my very first Game Boy Advance game. It's The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, released in 2004 in Europe, and it was released in 2005 in America. This is actually a classic. And this is actually my first Game Boy Advance game, and I had a lot of great memories playing that game. Next up in my collection, it's Mario Kart Super Circuit. This game was released in 2001. This was around the time when the Game Boy Advance was released. Yes, this is the third entry of the Mario Kart series and the first Mario Kart game that is released on a handheld console. This is actually a Mario Kart game, but this is actually a classic. Not as good as Mario Kart 64, but it's pretty fun to play. Next in my collection, Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, and Four Swords. This is actually a port of the Super Nintendo game, Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, and a bonus feature, Legend of Zelda Four Swords, a multiplayer game. Yeah, that was a legendary masterpiece on a handheld console. For those who never played the Super Nintendo version, this is definitely a good one. I brought this game back in 2007 when I'm on my holiday in England, and this game was released in 2003. Now, another game in my collection is another Mario game, Super Mario Advance 4 Super Mario Bros. 3. This is a remake of the classic NES game with the same name, but it was a Super Mario All-Stars version of Super Mario Bros. 3. Yep, a Super Mario game from Super Mario All-Stars on Super Nintendo that had been ported on the Game Boy Advance. It was released in 2003, the same year as Yoshi's Island, Super Mario World 2, Super Mario Advance 3. Yes. Well, this is actually the best Mario game on the Game Boy Advance, in my personal opinion. And next up, Advance Wars, released in 2001. And next up, Tekken Advance, the first portable Tekken game. Not as good as the first three Tekken games on the PlayStation, but it's still good. And next up, Dragon Ball Z Supersonic Warriors, released in 2004, which is the same year as Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. My favourite Dragon Ball Z game of all time. This is actually the best Dragon Ball Z game on the Game Boy Advance, in my opinion. Next up, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo Revival, the remake of the Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo game. This is actually quite a decent game. Next up is Yu-Gi-Oh! Worldwide Edition Stairway to the Destined Duel. A game that is based on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. Well, I remember watching Yu-Gi-Oh! When it's on Nickelodeon or on Nicktoons back in the day, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Was one of my favourite animes of all time. Well, the only Yu-Gi-Oh! Series I watched was the Duel Masters one. No. The Duel Monsters one. Yes. Now, I'm not really a fan of Duel Masters, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters was actually the best one. The best Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, in my opinion. But it's still a fun game. Next in my collection, Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure. Released in 2005, 1 year after Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3, and came out on the same year as the original Dragon Balls, and this game came out on the same year as the original Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi, and the game that is released on the same year as Dragon Ball GT Transformation. And this game came out in America in 2006, while this game came out in Europe in 2005. It's actually the best Dragon Ball game, in my opinion, on the Game Boy Advance. And this game starts off with the Emperor Pilaf saga or the Goku saga and ends with the King Piccolo saga. This is still a quite fun game. Next game in my collection, Power Rangers Dino Thunder. The Game Boy Advance game that is based on the 12th season of the Power Rangers show of the same name. This is actually a pretty fun game. This is much better than the console version. This is actually quite a decent game. But next up is another Power Rangers game. Power Rangers SPD, the game based on the 13th season of the show of the same name. This is actually the last Power Rangers game that is made by THQ. This game was released in 2005. Yeah, Power Rangers SPD was my favourite Disney-era Power Rangers season next to Dino Thunder and RPM. Wow. This is actually the last Power Rangers game on the Game Boy Advance. Yep. The two Game Boy Advance games based on two of the best Power Rangers seasons on the Game Boy from the Disney era, next to RPM. And 2 years after SPD, we got Power Rangers Super Legends. Well, I have Power Rangers Super Legends, but it's not a very good game in my thoughts. And coming up next, Pokemon Ruby version, released in 2003, the game that marks the beginning of the third Pokemon generation. And what's cool about the Game Boy Advance is you can put some Game Boy Advance games on the DS box. And this game had some memorable soundtracks and good characters. Next in my collection, Pokemon Fire Red, the remake of the Pokemon game that started it all, Pokemon Red version. I think this is actually the upgrade, the remake of the classic Pokemon game. I think this is better than the Pokemon Red game on the Game Boy, in my personal opinion. Updated graphics, updated sound, and a bunch of cool features. Next in my Game Boy Advance games collection, Pokemon Emerald version, the enhanced version of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, released in 2005 in Europe and America, 2 years after Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. It had an interesting story and tons of new features, including Battle Frontier. And this is still a pretty fun game, and my favourite Pokemon game on the Game Boy Advance. More games coming up. Next game in my collection, Sonic Advance 2, the sequel to Sonic Advance, which is Sonic's debut on the Game Boy Advance and a non-Sega handheld console. This is one of the games when Sega goes third party for the first time, while Sonic Adventure 2 Battle was Sonic's debut on the Nintendo console, while Sonic Heroes was Sonic's debut on the PS2 and on the Xbox. I think this is actually a ton of fun to play, but still good. Next in my collection, Spider-Man Mysterio's Menace. The game was released in 2001, which is the same year as Spider-Man 2. Enter Electro by Activision. This is still a pretty fun game. It's still a pretty cool game. Again, and the last game I have in my collection is another Dragon Ball Z game. It's Dragon Ball Z, The Legacy of Goku 2. Here's the front, side, and back. But this is actually the only Game Boy Advance game in my collection that's complete in the box. So, here's the cartridge. This game is actually the best game in the Legacy of Goku trilogy. Well, I have the first Legacy of Goku game, but it's not really good, but this one's a lot better. But there was also Boo's Fury that came out a year after Legacy of Goku 2, but Boo's Fury is only released in America, but not in Europe for unknown reason. Well, it's good, but the box was a bit misleading. You see, there was Adult Gohan, Kid Trunks, and Vegeta in his training outfit. Yeah, they were misleading. They did not appear on the game, while Kid Gohan, Teen Gohan, or pre-Teen Gohan, and Future Trunks and Vegeta in his battle armor appear in the game. Well, Goku and Piccolo are okay, but they appear on the game, but not those three. But it's still a pretty fun game to play. Well, that's it for my that's it for my Game Boy Advance games collection. I really hope you enjoy it. So I better go now. So before I go, I have a lot of great memories playing on the Game Boy Advance. It's filled with good memories and great moments. So thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.